Here as scheduled on time for the live stream to roll out GOPscorecard.com. Hope to have some fun today, not taking this too seriously. It's a brand new stat. There's probably going to be some bugs. I'm sure there's going to be some criticism. But the point I want to make is, I guess, it's better than what came before it, which was nothing. There's literally, we have statistics in baseball. The best easy statistic is on base plus slugging. There's better ones, but they're super sophisticated and so on. We have statistic in basketball, PER, to rank basketball players, and I'm aware of this stuff because I'm an amateur sport stat guy. But we have no statistic to evaluate the parties. And, I'm going to give a prepared statement and explain why am I focusing on the GOP. I think that's kind of obvious, but in any event, if it's not obvious, I'll explain it. I'm going to keep you, I think we're going to go through this in about a half an hour. I have about a half an hour material. And let's see, one thing I have to do, there's some technical things I have to do, which is for some reason, I'm using Restream, and Restream and StreamYard are the main software for streaming on multiple platforms. And I just find Restream easier to use, but there is sort of a glitch on Facebook, which I hope I can fix, if I can ever bring it up. It's for some reason, I see it here now, so edit privacy. For some reason, it says friends only, but now it's set to public. So last time I did this, I don't know, it was a while ago. People were complaining they couldn't get it, and I didn't know how to fix it in real time, but I figured it out. So we're now on 7 platforms. I tried to hook up D Live, but didn't work, and my email, my email communication with them has not been responded to yet. I get it; it's not a big company, so but we should be live on 7 platforms. So please share and like if you like this content. If you don't. We at the smallest liberty organization in the world with the longest list of valuable ideas and strategies and tactics, libertymovement.org. We do not accept donations. I made that decision. I'm going down with the ship on that decision. But there's plenty of ways to help what I'm trying to accomplish financially. We'll get into some of that. There's really 4 different ways, and mainly by buying my books on Amazon. I've got a bunch of them. And they do speak about, the subject matter of this broadcast, which is, does politics work? Does voting work? What does work? If not, politics, direct citizen action, things like that. So that's basically the intro. And but please share this around. The one thing I'll say, I might not have the most technology. I don't have the most staff. I don't have the biggest budget. But the one thing I will say about these programs and these podcasts and the Liberty Moving podcast, the Walking podcast, is that I'm glad I'm getting questions. Okay, so GOPscorecard.com, I don't have the website up yet. And that's just a lack of staff and funding. So if you want to look at I will have it up this year. I'm talking to my webmaster about that. So the scorecard itself, we'll get into that, is posted on Facebook as of like an hour ago, and it's also on Twitter. And if you, I'm going to go through it. If you don't have access to it, I guess I'll flash it on the screen. But I'm going to go through it. It's very simple. But yeah, I apologize for that, and thanks for the feedback. We're on YouTube. Thank you for telling me that. I'm not going to read names because it's a privacy thing. But I'm seeing some of the comments. Thank goodness I have my cell here, and so I can keep track of everything that's going on. I'm getting a notice that I'm on YouTube. So yeah, it's a live stream. It's we'll have a few glitches. I haven't really done a lot of this. I'd like to do a lot more in the coming year. 23 was kind of a tough year for me, but I hope to be a lot more productive in 2024. So that's basically the intro, and I have a prepared text which explains everything. It's not very long, and then we'll get into the scorecard. We'll review the history of the GOP from 1856 to the present, explain why the GOP fails to shrink government. We'll discuss the failure of conservatism. We'll talk about why voting doesn't work, basically, and we'll talk about some of the excuses that the GOP will use to respond to the scorecard. First of all, they'll ignore it. The old great example, they ignored Ayn Rand for decades. And then they couldn't ignore her anymore, and they started viciously attacking her. Just an example. I'm not comparing myself to Ayn Rand, but the first thing they do is they ignore you. So they'll ignore this first. But if they are confronted, they'll have some various excuses. We're going to talk about those. And then there's a couple of methodological issues for the policy wonks and geeks and technical people. We can get into that. And then we'll have open discussion. I mean, I'm prepared to stay, as long as I can hold out. But I know people are busy doing nothing right now. It's the middle of the day on January. Just kidding. But, look, you got over your hangover. The football game's on at 5. I'm not a college football guy, but I probably will tune in. I'm more of a Bills fan. It's a lot easier to follow when the roster is basically the same year after year. So that's basically about it. I did straighten out Facebook, so it's public. I did send out a national press release to a bunch of outlets, not all conservative, some libertarian, some conservative, some mainstream. I'd love to get on some of these shows. I think Bannon would be interested in this. So if you want to send Bannon, if you're, I don't know, a supporter or whatever, watch his show, you can send him an email. He did get the email. My work's been discussed on his show, but I've actually never been on the show. Would love to be on there. He's open to having libertarians on. He has his own strong views. I get it. He's a populist. I saw him speak in Buffalo. I'm familiar with his work. I think there's some similarities. Look, we're getting our asses kicked, so I'm a big tent guy, a hardcore ideological, but I'm a big tent guy. I'm willing to work with people to accomplish the smallest advance towards liberty. And then what you do is you take that and you parlay it. Any of you horse betting people know what I'm talking about. You take the momentum from that and you win a slightly bigger victory. And that's the problem in this movement. I personally had some victories with the war on drugs years ago, but then it kind of petered out. There hasn't been that many victories in the LP to parlay. So I'm a pragmatist on strategy and tactics. I'm willing to work with anybody within reason. There's certain people, obviously, I don't want to be associated with either for appearance's sake or because I just don't want to be associated with them. But yeah, I'm big tent. I'll work with pretty much everybody. I know I'm babbling a bit. We'll get into the program shortly, but I've sort of given up efforts to work with the left. But if the left, I've challenged the left to have me debate anything, anytime, anywhere. I'll be there. But they don't want to debate. They just want to, they just want to emote and bash you. So let me get into the intro that kind of explains the whole thing, because I know a couple of people had questions. Why are you going after the GOP, not the Democrats, and so on? So basically, this will explain everything, and then we'll get into the scorecard and the rest of the items that I already mentioned. And again, please share, please like, please comment. This scorecard is not the final word. It's rolled out. It's beta. There may be glitches in it. We'll figure it out. So if you favor liberty and smaller government, you have 3 options. 2 are well known, and the third is barely thought of or spoken about. The first is conventional politics, mainly voting and supporting candidates. Conventional politics also includes lobbying and lawsuits. However, the most popular activity by far is voting, with supporting candidates a distant second. Relatively few citizens lobby Congress or file lawsuits to shrink government. History has shown, and theory can explain, why voting has failed to increase overall liberty for American citizens since 1800. Yet, this failed approach is the most popular current strategy to increase liberty. We are told repeatedly and endlessly that voting works. We have a duty to vote, and if we do not vote, we are not doing our duty as citizens. About 150 million Americans voted in 2020, but liberty shrank. The second option for those who want more liberty is to do nothing. This seems counterintuitive. However, there is no logical contradiction here. One can believe in liberty, yet also believe that voting is a waste of time, or worse, one can believe that voting legitimizes the tyrannical government we suffer under. That indeed is the likely reason why the political establishment urges everyone to vote. They know voting rarely, if ever, threatens their power, but always serves as an alleged justification for their exercise of power over us. In 2020, 80 million Americans did not vote. It's worth noting that even though a huge number of people did not vote, no one is suggesting that this abstention is a serious challenge to the perceived legitimacy of the regime. In our political system, the two major parties dominate the scene. We need not delve into the reasons for this for our present purposes. It is simply a fact. The last new or arguably third-party candidate to win the White House was Lincoln in 1860. However, he was not a true third-party candidate. The Whig Party simply evaporated very quickly and was essentially replaced by the Republican Party, which by and large had the same platform and same constituencies. Even Teddy Roosevelt, a monumental figure in American history, could not win as a third-party candidate, nor could Ross Perot, a wealthy, famous, and charismatic businessman, running against two weak opponents. Although their roles have flipped over time, I'll be done in a few minutes, have flipped over time. From the era of our great-grandparents, the Democrats have been the big government progressive party, always urging ever bigger government. Since 1913, when the progressive era began to revolutionize American government, government has grown steadily by leaps and bounds, usually, but not always, thanks to Democratic initiatives. In any event, in 2024, there is no doubt that the Democratic Party is the party of government, the progressive big government party, the party of the public sector. Rarely is any liberty voter tempted to vote Democratic, as this seems entirely counterintuitive. In recent decades, pro-liberty voters tend to vote Republican, frankly, in a knee-jerk Pavlovian manner. The widely held perception, carefully fostered by the GOP itself, is that the GOP is the sworn enemy of the Democrats, the sworn enemy of big progressive centralized government in Washington. They are perceived to be the party of liberty and the party of the private sector. Pro-liberty voters who choose not to vote Republican are often chastised and derided and are endlessly told that they are, quote, wasting their vote, even though, as noted above, voting has not increased American liberty for 234 years. By their own logic, hundreds of Americans have been wasting their votes for hundreds of years. The reality, however, differs from the perception by a huge chasm. I have written about this elsewhere and at great length for many decades. The Republican Party, in truth, was founded, as noted by Teddy Roosevelt, as a progressive big government party and as the foil of the Democrats, then considered a small government party except for slavery, which was a failed big government program. The truth is, except for a few good years under Harding Coolidge, Republicans either grew government or sat back and watched as the Democrats grew government. The GOP has, in fact, failed to repeal a single major progressive program since 1913-14, when the Democrats kicked off the progressive era with the big three: the Federal Reserve, the income tax, and the federal onslaught into the realms of drugs and medicine, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, popularly known as the War on Drugs, which continues to be the main driver of violent crime in America 110 years later. History shows and theory can explain why the GOP has failed and will likely continue to fail to increase liberty and shrink the federal government, regardless of which party wins power this year. What has been lacking is a way to prove to the rank and file conservative, libertarian, Republican, or populist voters that the GOP has failed and delineates the precise extent of that failure. That is why I developed the GOP scorecard that I announced today. The explicit purpose of the scorecard is this: to encourage liberty voters to consider utilizing the third option of political strategy, since the first two have clearly failed for decades and are likely to continue to fail: direct citizen action. LibertyMovement.org is the leading advocate of direct action on the planet and has many direct action projects ongoing or in the works. These include Free the Children, Liberty Moving, Vote with Your Feet, Get Armed, Get Fit, Get Trained, Vote with Your Verdicts, Learn and Teach Economics, Liberty Parenting, Voting with Your Wallet, Voting with Your Health, which I'm writing a book about by that name, Exit the Fed, Exit Left-Wing Colleges, and Audit the Paycheck. The problem with conventional politics is, and we get to the heart of the matter here. The problem with conventional politics is it gives people a false hope that change will happen through the political process when all known evidence and all known theory shows this is false. Bad ideas drive out good ones. Political action crowds out direct action. The purpose of the GOP scorecard is to move people towards the wonderful world of strategies and tactics that actually work, namely direct citizen action, and away from those that not only fail, but which are counterproductive because they reward the very entity, the GOP and its allies in the media, that have failed for decades to deliver on their promises. Let's be honest, these folks are the controlled opposition. For more information on how you can get involved, go to libertymovement.org and follow me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Substack, YouTube, and many other platforms. Thank you, and I hope to see you online. Libertymovement.org is self-sustaining and does not accept donations, but you can help us by buying our books and merch, by promoting our social media accounts. As I noticed in some of these accounts I've signed up recently, like Rumble and DLive, even though I'm not hooked up to DLive today, they do allow monetization. And I've frankly had all sorts of trouble getting monetized on Facebook and Twitter, even though I spend a lot of time there and I'm, quite civilized, and I don't knowingly violate any of their rules. So it's important to follow me in some of these accounts and maybe to generate some ad revenue so I can do more of these projects. Also, I'm available for speeches anywhere in the country. We can talk about price. It'll be less than whoever else you'd get, and I'm a better speaker. Sorry, it's true. Thanks in advance for your support. So let me get right into the scorecard. As I said, I'm an old sports stat guy, and I tried to keep this simple. This is a copy of the sheet. I don't know if you can see it, if it's backwards or frontwards. I don't know how that works. But this is on Twitter and Facebook, and I will get the website up. Just it's been a super busy year. Had a little bit of time during the holidays to get this thing up and running, and I'll get the website up. But it is on social media. So basically, what I did is when the House came in Republican, I said, well, I kind of know how this is going to end because I've been following this for 40 years, but let's see if we can have a scorecard. So I came up with a 5-part score for a stat. 5 times 20 equals 100. So the baseline as of January 1st, 2023, and some of these statistics are difficult to get. Some of them are estimates, but I did the best I could. And as time goes on, I can go back and correct these in case there's any discrepancies or more accurate statistics available. So the 5 factors are, and I think this pretty much covers everything, the spending, this is actual spending, debt held by the public, number of federal agencies, number of federal employees, and number of troops overseas. I think that those 5 factors, certainly number of troops overseas, kind of covers the whole war concept because we haven't been invaded since 1812. Regulation, and I believe that the costs of regulation are greatly underestimated and greatly understated. And I've said this repeatedly, and the problem is that the effects of regulation are so hard to measure that they're not directly included in the statistic, but they are indirectly included in the statistic because regulations require the expenditure of money. So spending is in there. They often require that money be borrowed to pay because we're not taking enough money to pay our bills. not our bills, the federal government's bills. So number of agencies obviously reflects the degree of regulation. Number of employees, every regulation has to be enforced by bureaucrats, and not so much the troops overseas. But so regulation is actually in there. So basically what I did using publicly available numbers, I came up with a baseline numbers for all 5 factors. For example, number of agencies at the beginning of the year is 436. It's still 436 as far as I know, using the Federal Register as my authority. Plus, I've also looked at all the bills passed by Congress this year, and none of them purport to get rid of any agencies. And Joe Biden's not the type of president who's going to be getting rid of agencies that he entirely controls. So again, the baseline score is 100, and then I went in through 2023 and came up with all these numbers that under the House GOP's reign. Now, people are going to say, well, they're not totally responsible for everything that happened because there's certain lag time. And, I have a couple of responses to that. First of all, they are responsible because in a couple of occasions, which I'll get into during the later on in the program, they had an opportunity to cut government and they didn't. In fact, they did the opposite. They suspended the debt ceiling, which is just absolutely horrendous. But so the other thing is that when these people are running for office, do they say, by the way, if you elect me, I can't do anything for a year and a half? Well, if they're not running on that basis, I don't know why we would accept that as an excuse. But the bottom line is, I did this stat, prospectively for the future. I expect the Republicans to take the White House and the Senate. And if they do, we'll have the annual stat to evaluate them, because once they're in charge of all 3 branches of legislative and executive branch, you know what I mean, there's 2 branches of Congress, then they won't have any excuses at all. But I think they are basically responsible, but over time they'll be even more responsible. For the stat will have more resonance and more relevance and more significance as time goes on. And if it's done annually, if people like the stat, I'll do it annually. If not, I'll do some other project. So in the scorecard, I list the sources. 4 of the 5 sources of the government itself, and one is pretty reliable website, usafacts.org. So basically for the spending went down slightly, but no thanks to the Republicans, and probably maybe COVID related slight reduction in spending. We don't have December yet though, and I kind of had to estimate what December was. So that results in the score of 19.93, a slight improvement, but again, not really the responsibility of the GOP. But and then debt held by the public is exploding, and debt held by the public, by the way, is a better measure than overall debt, because who cares what money the government owes itself? Although everybody always talks about the total debt because it's a bigger number. I want to talk about the number that's more relevant, which is debt held by the public. That's money that the government owes to other people. So debt held by the public at the beginning of the year was 24.5 trillion, and at the end of the year it's 26.9 trillion. Drastic increase. And so that score goes from 20 points, the baseline, to 21.94. That's the biggest increase. Agencies stayed the same. That's 20 and 20. Federal employees went up significantly. So there's now almost 3 million federal employees. And we went from 20 to 20.5. And then troops overseas, this is a statistic that's misleading, and it's tough to get the statistics on this, but it seemed to have gone down slightly. So you get like from 20 to 19.49. But I think really when we find out all the troops that are going overseas in response to Ukraine, I'm sure there's stealth forces over there. I'm sure we've got all sorts of troops in the Middle East that nobody knows about. So I think, but again, I'm sticking to the formula just for the integrity of the stat over time. You can't do little asterisks all over the place so you don't have a stat. And this is a rough measure. It's not It's not designed to be fine-tuned. It's designed something you could tape to your refrigerator when you're going to vote and decide who to vote for, or whether to vote for third party, or whether to not vote at all. So the final score, if you can see it. So the final score at the bottom, we begin the year at a 100, and then at the end of the year, it's 101.86. So instead of shrinking government, which is the only real function, I believe, of the Republican Party, as far as I've been listening to the speeches since Barry Goldwater ran for president. Government got bigger. It should be getting smaller. It's grotesquely too large. It's not affordable. It's crushing us. This isn't a program about how the economy has affected us, but, I wrote in Progressivism about all that 8 years ago, and everything's worse now. Basically, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and really, only the top 15, 20% of people are doing well. Many of them are in the political class. Now, if you're in that top 20%, you got, I don't know, $1 million net worth and a couple $100,000 in the bank or whatever, and you did it by working hard in the private sector, that's fine. But many of the people, it's a skewed statistic, because many of the people who are doing well are in the political class, defense lobbyists and people like that, retired congressmen working as lobbyists. So the economy's in the shitter, and anybody who's in contact with the real world knows that. And I'm middle class. I'm in the upper working class, whatever you want to say. So I see both sides. I see people who are better off than me, regular contact with them. I see people who are not as well off as I am, and people who are on the same level. I see them all the time. I'm in the real world. I'm not hiding in some Washington think tank. So that's the scorecard. Just want to talk. Let me see how we're doing in time here. I've already gone a half an hour, so I'm going to speed it up. So is this a shock? And will it be a shock even if Trump wins and the government doesn't shrink? Because he didn't shrink the government the first time. And I'm not entirely hostile to the Trump movement. I'm more friendly to the Trump movement than what Trump actually did as president, except for keeping us out of any new major wars. I think he continued a couple of wars that should have been continued. But so I don't think, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you look at my book, Political Class Dismissed, there's an essay in here called Republicans and Big Government. And this kind of goes through the whole history. This was written during the Bush. This is written 2002, which shows you how long I've been on this mission to expose the GOP for what it is. So I go through the various presidents, excluding, I talk about Bush 2 in the article itself. But I have a chart in here. Herbert Hoover, he was a big government progressive, made government bigger. Dwight Eisenhower made government bigger. And there's all sorts of examples. Richard Nixon was a real big government progressive. Gerald Ford increased spending, but he have a joke in here, reduced spending on federal prisons by pardoning Nixon. Pretty funny. Ronald Reagan, the big myth, the greatest actor that ever played president. He increased federal spending 53%, added 250,000 civilian employees, created the drug czar's office, escalated the war on drugs. I heard him speak in Washington, I think it was 84 at the American Bar Association. He increased Social Security taxes and so on. So Reagan's a myth. You can still, love him if you want, but the facts are the facts. Don't shoot the messenger. George Herbert Walker Bush increased federal spending and added created a lot of litigation with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I don't really think helps disabled people. I'm not an expert in that area. A lot of inflation and added taxes, and the Republican Congress under Newt Gingrich, same thing. So the point is that this is longstanding, folks. And if you look at the original Republican Party platform of 1856, you'll see it's the old Whig Party with the addition of restricting slavery in the territories. And the government got gigantic under Lincoln. He added the Jeffersonian Democrats left because they were mostly in the South, and he added all sorts of agencies that still plague us today. I think agriculture was added under Lincoln. But Tom DiLorenzo in his books, in which I'm quoted, it covers all of that. So the Republican Party really, as I said, with the exception of Harding Coolidge, has never really been a small government party. As far as I don't want to get too much because we're kind of over time a little bit, but as far as why the GOP fails to shrink government, I talked about that in Progressivism, a Primer, and I'm not going to go into that in detail. But one of the things you have to understand is that the Republican Party on the national level is mostly made up of people who have been in government their whole lives. And if you look at McCarthy and McConnell, they're perfect examples. McCarthy, I think, started working for the government when he was in college, and they come up through the machine, and the government is really the only thing they've ever known. And they, by rising through the various levels of power to get to Washington, they played the political game, the catering to special interests, not doing anything to take any programs away that might cost them an election. So there's a number of these dynamics that explain why the Republican Party has failed, which are, I'm not going to belabor the point now. They're in my books and podcasts and so on. The failure of conservatism, not too much time to go into that either, because I don't want to keep you all day. But conservatism has a number of problems. One of the problems with conservatism is it's not really very well defined, and it's usually the problem with the right generally. And I don't consider myself a part of the right, but I certainly don't consider myself left wing either. The problem with the right wing generally and conservatism is that it's always reacting. What's it reacting to? It's reacting to the left. The left is a coherent, powerful idea, equality and utopia and various other related things. And the problem with conservatism is not really well defined. So there's a libertarian element of conservatism, as Ronald Reagan pointed out. However, the non-libertarian elements usually roll over the libertarian elements, the war on drugs, the foreign intervention. There's a militaristic and authoritarian streak in the Republican Party, that in a moralistic streak, which is inconsistent with liberty. So these discrepancies in supporting liberty weaken the conservatives and Republicans in terms of battling for liberty. And that's the quick, easy explanation. Why voting doesn't work? Well, it hasn't worked. We know it hasn't worked. Why doesn't it work? Well, first of all, the government controls the K through PhD schools. So that's game, set, match right there. The dominance of politics by special interest groups that can always out-organize, outspend the interest of the average person. Rational ignorance, it's very difficult, like this statistic shows, it's very difficult for even somebody like me as a researcher to get the proper data to even figure out what is going on in Washington. And most people don't have that incentive. So for those reasons and other reasons, one of the problems with voting is voting for what? What's on the menu? When you go to as I pointed out in one of my podcasts, you go to a diner, and I'm going to try to not be too long on this, but you go to a diner, and first of all, you don't even have to go to that diner. There's 50 other diners in Western New York, and you don't have to go to a diner. You can go to a Mexican restaurant or Italian restaurant. I always prefer going to locally owned, but my point is, in the marketplace, you get choice. This is what I advocate. Liberty, and one of the aspects of liberty is the marketplace. There's other aspects of liberty too that don't involve buying and selling goods and services, like the family. My kids didn't rent their rooms from me. It was a different deal. But the marketplace, which is how we deal with strangers and the average person out there, people we don't know, you have all this choice. And you could choose one restaurant out of 500. Then you go to that restaurant, you have to spend 5 or 10 minutes. It's agonizing over all the choices. What choice do you have when you vote? What if you don't like what's on the menu? I mean, and then if you like what's on the menu, there's no guarantee that they're even going to deliver because, again, without a GOP scorecard and all sorts of ways to rein these people in, it's very difficult to hold these people responsible. So, look, they're not going to solve all these problems here or explain everything here. I'm just trying to give a general idea of why voting doesn't work, why the GOP fails, why government gets bigger every year. Government gets bigger. It's explained in Political Class Dismissed. Government gets wrong book. That was progressivism. Government grows all the time. That's what government does, unless it's stopped by a superior force. And generally speaking, government tends to grow. There's no laws of history, but the tendency of history is governments generally grow until they collapse the society upon which they depend. That's why the Soviet Union collapsed. So it's really difficult. Without direct action does work, and we can talk about that on another occasion. So some of these excuses, the Republicans, they just got into power and they need time, blah, 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 blah. Well, on May 29th, they passed the fiscal responsibility. I love these Orwellian terms, implementing a bipartisan deal between Biden and McCarthy. And that, most significantly, that suspended the debt ceiling until January 1st, 2025. So you say, well, what power does the House have? Well, the one power they have in real time that could affect spending and debts and all interest and all this other stuff and any other policies that you want to log roll into it is the debt ceiling. And they caved on that. So yes, even though they just got in there and they're stuck with some previous budgets and so on, yes, they are responsible for this. And as time goes on, they'll be more and more responsible because next year they won't be able to say, oh, we couldn't have controlled that. Well, but they did on May 29th. And then the other thing they did on my notes here, which was pretty bad, under the new speaker, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, they passed another budget bill on November 14th with no serious spending cuts. So yes, the GOP is responsible in real time for a piece of the fact that the government grew under their watch. But more than that, though, these people don't even have a plan. Like, even if they had the votes, even if they controlled everything, they controlled the whole Congress and the White House under Bush. And they controlled the Congress and the White House under Trump. They didn't have a plan. They're not interested in it. And the reason is there's many reasons that are discussed in my books. They don't want to lose a fucking election. That's the reason. They're not doing anything to change the trajectory. They're not going out there like I am, educating people. What is this ruling ideology, progressivism? Does it work or not? It doesn't work. If you go into Progressivism, a primer, I drill down. I talk about government only does 6 things. Tax, regulate, inflate, conscription, eminent domain, and war. It only does 6 things. And all 6 things basically are bad. And I explained that. I drill down on it. I explained it in terms that I don't dumb anything down, but I distill things down, and I write and speak in plain English. You could give progressivism to a graduate of high school, and frankly, every graduate in high school in the country should read it. It explains all of this stuff, why government doesn't work. The Republican Party is not explaining this. All they do really is they jerk your chain by attacking Biden, and Michelle Obama went on vacation, and Barack Obama went golfing, or he knew some communist when he was a kid, blah, 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 blah. None of it talks about nuts and bolts policy. None of it, they don't even attack the policy. They attack the personalities. Karl Rove and people like that have come up with all these brainwashing tactics over the years and these are the reasons why they bamboozle everybody. There's no serious spending proposals. And on the state level too. And there is by the way, I will roll out a state scorecard, which is going to be just 4 factors: spending, debt, number of employees, and number of agencies. Real simple, and I'll roll that out if there's interest in this. But what about the state level? I close on this thought, and then I think I'm basically going to be done unless there's some discussion, and I got to figure out how to get comments and questions. So what has the GOP done on the state level? The foundation of big government in America is the K through 12 government school. And I put out a book a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I think. And at that time, there were 23 states that the Republicans controlled. You can see them right there. Now, the Republican Party says, we hate socialism. We're for educational choice. The parents should dictate that. Really? Folks, if you take one thing out of this live stream, all those red states could abolish K through 12, mandatory, socialized, propagandized, run by Democratic teachers unions, even in the red states. They could abolish them tomorrow. Some would require a constitutional amendment, but that could be done in a year. But they could do the groundwork to get it on the ballot in a day. And if there's no constitutional right, and there is in some states, there is in some states, the Republican Party could get rid of government schools in those states. I don't remember what they are. They're in the book. In a day. Why haven't they done it? Because the Republican Party is a fraud scheme, folks. I hate to say that. Don't shoot the messenger. So a couple of methodological issues real quick. I think over time, inflation might be a factor in this and population growth. We can figure that out over time, but I don't think on a year-to-year basis that provides any sort of explanation. I don't think that the GOP failed on two major occasions to rein in spending because of inflation or because of we have more people in the country now. That's really silly. But over time, I think those are methodological things. So that's basically it. I just want to encourage everybody to check out my books if you want to support what I'm doing. They're good books. This book, by the way, is very timely because it explains the mess in the Middle East. It explains it in clear terms. Since World War I, the U.S. has been over there messing things up. This is another book about direct action. Take your kids out of government schools. That was really how I got started in this whole mode of thinking. And 5 of my books talk about direct action. This is another direct action book. The Second Amendment Works. I'm writing a sequel, but if this book is, I think, the best primer on the subject, but also explains how you can, as an individual, advance liberty. And I've already talked about some of my other books. I have several books on Kindle, and that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. And I'll get better at responding to comments. I do see some comments here. Illegal immigration. It's not a subject that I'm covering here or in the scorecard. I do have a plan on immigration, which is on a Kindle. I had it on LinkedIn, but I figured, if you give things away for free, people don't value it. So it's on Kindle for like $3. I think I cracked the code. The problem is that my approach will not be popular on the right or the left, so I don't expect it to be enacted anytime soon. So I think that's my one and only venture into the world of immigration. I think I solved the problem analytically, conceptually, and it's up to other people to say, yeah, Strelski's right, let's do this. I won't go into the details now. We're on 45 minutes. I want to thank everybody for being on the stream, sharing it, liking it, all your comments, all your support throughout the year. I can't thank everybody who's purchased my books. Amazon doesn't tell me exactly who they are, and who supported some of the lawsuits. I do plan to do a Second Amendment lawsuit, which would be crowdfunded. That's the only exception. I do do fundraise for lawsuits because, frankly, there's no other way to do these types of lawsuits. But I don't ask for donations for libertymovement.org. If you want to get involved, you will never be asked for a donation. Period. You will be reminded that there's ways to buy merchandise and so on, but that's not a donation. That's a capitalist act between consenting adults, as Robert Nozick would say, one of the great libertarian philosophers of my college years, who's no longer with us. He died too soon. So I'm going to wrap it up with that. I think I'm going to go back on Twitter Spaces after I have a beverage, maybe a New Year's appropriate beverage. But this has been fun. I appreciate it. We'll figure out. I can't say I'm looking at Restream, so I'm not necessarily looking at comments. I'll figure all that out in the future. Any comments that are made, I'll try to respond to in real time. But I know I've burned 45 minutes of your time. I know you weren't doing anything anyway in the middle of the day, but you're getting ready for the football game. You're getting ready for a family event, or maybe to hit the gym or something like that. So really appreciate it. I kept this. I was going to do an hour, but I figured 45 minutes is enough. Covered a lot of ground and spread this around. And if you have a favorite podcast, Bannon or Tucker Carlson is going to be tough to get on, but I think he would appreciate my work. Send out those suggestions. I was interviewed by Scott Horton the other day. I'm getting back into the national sort of media scene. I have a national press list and speaking gigs. People like my speeches. I can't leave. I'm not walking out of there until the lights are out most of the time. So apparently, even though I don't dumb anything down and I don't mince words at all, people like my speeches. So have me to your group, throw me a couple shekels, some expense money if I travel, and we can move. We can get the liberty movement back in a position where we're changing the country. This is a country created by the liberty movement in the first place. If you read progressivism, you'll know exactly what I mean. So on that note, happy New Year. Peace be with you all in this very violent world of violent governments violating our liberty constantly, and war is the most efficient way to violate our liberty. So hopefully we'll have a better, more peaceful year. See you all soon online, everybody. Thank you.